Wicked hearts have sweetest smiles. Chapter 5. The way to the restrooms led into the opposite direction of her own room, so her steps were unsettled, for she had never been in that part of the huge palace before. Aveline even had to ask the guards in front of the ballroom door where to go, and she had felt really embarrassed about this. After all, she was the personal assistant of an utterly important prince, but she did not even know the layout of mentioned prince's residence. Her body, especially her feet that were tucked into very high-heeled strappy pumps, which nobody could see because of the long dress, burned like hell, and the bones in her back felt like they would crumble with each pace she made. The corridor seemed to be endlessly long, but then took an abrupt cease after turning right at the end of the way. The ladies' restroom was beautifully decorated, with white and pinkish lilies refurbishing it, velvet towels that were folded into swans and butterflies, and a flavor of blooming flowers was laying in the air, simple and light. While washing her hands, Aveline looked closely at her reflection in the drawn-out mirror above the sink. More than a few strands had loosened from her tied-up hair, according her appearance a touch of chaos, but also perniciousness. Her makeup still was perfect, although the rouge had gone off and had been replaced by the own redness of her cheeks. Her eyes and mouth grinned consistent with each other. After checking if she was alone, and indeed she was, she sighed loud and happily. The evening had been wonderful so far. Aveline could not have wished for more, but a little voice inside her clearly begged to differ. Yes, of course she desired more. More of this feeling the prince induced inside her chest, more of his warm and gentle touches on her chilly body, just more of him. His lips upon hers, his fingers caressing her skin, and his eyes peeking at her in order to devour every detail with their gaze. Alarmed by her own thoughts, she shook her head vehemently and mumbled unintelligible curses to herself, grabbed the door handle, and left. Lost in thought, she started walking along cold stone tiles beneath her, until she suddenly heard a yelp, paused, and then hearkened intensely. The restroom was too far away as if the scream could have emerged from it, so the only other option was the door a few meters ahead of her on the left side. She frowned, for she could not remember noticing the door a few minutes ago. The next moments passed by in complete silence. Aveline yet again shook her head. Her mind must have tricked her. But just as she was about to start moving, there was another shout.
"Hello? Is anybody there?"
It obviously came from the door on the left, this strangely familiar voice, limber and a bit coolish, but Aveline did not recognize, nor was she even able to say if it was male or female.
"Please, I think my leg is broken. I really cannot stand up by myself."
Aveline had hesitated, but now she almost jumped to the door, wanted to open it, but it was stuck.
I'm sorry, but the handle won't budge. Just wait while I go get some help, okay?
"No!
The voice cried out in panic and made Aveline cringe.
Don't leave! I beg you! It's so dark in here and I'm afraid!"
She felt terribly uncomfortable, but she couldn't tell why. Perhaps it was this voice. She had surely heard it before, but whose face hid behind it? She swallowed the unease which attempted to lace up her throat, and tried to push down the latch afresh. It did not work.
How did that happen?
She asked to console the person on the other side.
"Someone pushed me in here, right into the darkness. My leg hurts so much, please hurry up."
Aveline repeated the action she did before, but it still seemed as if someone would hold against it from the inside.
Are you sure there's no object?
In that moment the handle budged, and after almost losing her balance, nearly falling into the hard ground, she stumbled into the room. Not 2 seconds did pass. The door shut itself silently. Of course she had not paid attention to it. 2 hands seemed to appear out of nowhere, dashing towards her rapidly. Her body got pressed against the perished wall, which made breathing rather difficult. One hand was over her mouth, the other one pushed adamantly against her back.
My, what have we here? I was so sure you would not fall for that charade."
Aveline froze under the words the voice whispered mockingly into her ear, making her spine tingle from repugnance. She now had no difficulties to assign this cold, arrogant voice.
You should be honored, being the first chosen woman,
he murmured while shifting his weight so the rough surface of the wall scraped her left jowl that was pushed against it violently. Her eyes were open widely, with tears sparkling and an expression full of despair and dread inside them.
Na, will you be tame?
The final attempt to release herself by squirming free miscarried, and her muscles went limp under the pressure of Clovis' heft. Although he possessed a rather slender, tall figure, he nevertheless seemed to also hold extraordinary strength.
It is strange, don't you think? After all these years of male subordinates, he chooses you, an unimpressive average female with no remarkable beauty nor any notable talents. No.
He grabbed her wrists, held them bound together with one hand, his body still locking her in between himself and the wall, while his other hand reached down to the bottom of her dress. Aveline first knit her brows, but then squinted her eyes when she realized what he was going to do. Her crying for help was smothered by the palm of his hand.
But the worst fact about my brother's fail pick is,
he whispered in her ear, slightly gasping. It undoubtedly cost him quite some of his strength to keep her struggling body under control.
That he does not want to share you.
Clovis susurrated deviously, with his voice merely being perceptible. She could clearly feel his bare fingertips wandering along the inside of her thighs when he continued.
That is not very fair. Don't you agree, Miss LaCroix? He is my brother, and brothers share among one another. Isn't that correct?
A moment of silence passed when he, now sizzling and menacing, demanded an answer to his question. Aveline nodded hastily, tears running down her cheeks, over the foreign knuckles, until they finally fell and dropped onto the floor.
Then tell me, Miss LaCroix, why is he unwilling to share you?
She quivered under the flogging tune of his voice. Aveline did not have any idea what Prince Clovis was talking about, nor did she want to know. Escape was her only thought, but there were only few options. Actually, there was solely one idea she could come up with. Breathing deeply through her nose, she suddenly stopped to resist, and even managed to ignore the foreign hand on her lower region, attempting to crawl into her underwear. But the moment she quit struggling, he too paused in his movement.
Finally accepting that opposition is in vain.
He mocked and grinned disgustingly. Exploiting the slackening of his tight grasp, Aveline pushed him away with a jar, grabbed the door handle and threw it open, not daring to look back, only running into the corridor, which dimmed light still offered more safety than the room she had been in the last minutes. Tears blurred her sight as if they wanted her to fall down. There were no noises, and all she could hear was her own heartbeat pumping inside her ear. There was still no room in her mind to think about the events that had only happened moments ago. All she wished for was to run. Run away from that monster, which wore the face of Prince Clovis, until her legs would give in, everything spin around in her head, and her body would eventually collapse. This plan, however, got quickly interrupted by a tall figure she bumped into. The rebound hit her hard, and she could feel her arms flail into the empty air, desperately searching for hold. In expectation to thud on the rigid floor, Aveline closed her eyes, waiting for the pain to infiltrate her nerves, but all she was able to perceive were two hands preventing her from encountering the adamant ground. When she opened her eyes, she was feared that Prince Clovis had overtaken in order to finish what he had started.
Are you all right?
Prince Schneizel's troubled voice seemed to come from very far away. Tears which had ceased running down her face yet again began to flow, and Aveline wished nothing more than to answer, to explain, but she could not. Her lips were opened, ready to deliver words of this previous terrible occurrence, but she was unable to. Instead, she watched the second prince until her body ultimately gave in, and a faint overcame her.
Miss LaCroix! Miss... Aveline.
The last thing she heard was his worried whisper before darkness embraced her and so forced her to rest.
I really cannot say when she's going to wake up, or how her mental status will be. From what you have told me, that she has not been responsive to anything you said, she may have experienced a psychic trauma, but this is just one possibility. As long as she is unconscious, however, I really cannot state more about her condition. I'm very sorry, Your Highness.
The doctor, who had checked her for the last hour, curled his lips into a little encouraging smile, took a last look at the motionless body beneath the white satin sheets, and then left the room without another word. Prince Schneizel stepped closer and gazed at his subordinate's face, who appeared to be even paler under this terribly light blanket. Her chest lifted and lowered inactively, as if it was tired of this function. From time to time, the eyes beneath her lids sprung back and forth rapidly, whilst her small, fragile fingers shivered under the sight of the dreams she underwent. A worried expression still was adorning his face while he seized a chair and took a seat beside her bed to remain for a little bit longer. He examined her closely and was lost in such deep thoughts, so that he did not realize that, after some minutes, her eyes opened and stared back at him without expression.
Your Highness?
Her voice sounded hoarse and raspy, as if she had not used it for days.
Why are you in my room? Is anything wrong? Are we under attack? Did something go wrong at the ceremony?
She asked in panic, starting up from the mattress in order to get onto her feet.
Shh. Calm down.
The prince answered softly, laying his hands on her shoulders to let her glide back onto the bed gently.
We are not under attack, nor did anything go wrong. Don't you worry. It is actually you who I worry about.
Aveline blushed immediately, cleared her throat, then tilted her head and gave him a questioning look, for she had no idea what he meant.
What do you remember from last night?
I remember the ceremony and how beautiful Princess Euphemia was in her dress. Then...
She told him all she could recollect, but no single reaction was strange or somehow inappropriate when she described what she had done or with whom she had spoken.
Forgive my curiosity, but did something anomalous happen, or why are my memories that important?
Well, that is what I wanted to ask you.
I cannot follow you, Your Highness.
With a few words he explained how she had acted, but no matter how much she desired to regain her memory, those pictures seemed to be lost within her mind forevermore.
Anyway, you are in need of some rest, and the doctor has also requested that I send for him when you awake.
Aveline was laying there, only stared at the prince's back uncomprehendingly, while this one stepped quietly through the door. She then let out a deep-drawn sigh and leaned back. It was so strange what the prince had said. How could memories even be forgotten, and was it possible to retrieve them? The thoughts inside her mind were buzzing around ceaselessly, but she was unable to grasp at least one, so she decided to rest a bit more. She invested a final attempt to remember, but all she could think of was the sound of Schneizel's voice, whispering her name like he did the evening before.